Hello and welcome to Section 4, How Trees Grow. I'm Bob Parker, the Extension Forester for Baker and Grant Counties, and I'll be your instructor for this section. In the previous section on site factors, we saw that the capacity of your site to grow trees is determined in part by physical factors, such as the climate, soils, aspect, elevation, and so on. And we learned that site capacity is also a function of the health and vigor of the trees. It is important to understand the capabilities of your site so you can determine reasonable forest management goals and objectives. It is also important to understand the biological process of tree growth because your forest management activities can have a direct influence on tree growth rates, stand health, tree form, and wood quality. Here's what we will cover in this section. We'll talk about the basics of photosynthesis, the parts of a tree and what they do, the fundamental biological processes of tree growth, how tree crowns affect growth, and finally, we'll look at common silvicultural activities and how they can impact tree growth. The basic parts of all trees are the leaves, branches, the main trunk, and the roots. We generally classify trees as either hardwoods with flat, broad leaves or softwoods or conifers with needle-shaped foliage. Very different shapes, but they function pretty much the same way. If you look at a leaf in cross-section, the bottom has small holes called stomata which allow it to breathe, much as we breathe. Except where we take in oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide, trees have it backwards. They consume carbon dioxide for photosynthesis and exhale oxygen. The main function of leaves is to capture the energy of sunlight and, through the magic of photosynthesis, combine water and CO2 to produce the simple sugars the tree needs to grow. Trees use their simple sugars for a variety of functions, such as growth and reproduction. Trees will store some food for later use, and a healthy tree that has lots of resources is able to produce compounds that can help defend it from attacks by insects and diseases. For trees, the bottom line is that they need a full and healthy crown in order to produce the food resources they need to be vigorous and healthy. So your job as the forest manager is to be sure your trees have adequate crowns. Tree roots have one big disadvantage. Because they are below ground, too often it's out of sight, out of mind, and sometimes forest practices are used that either damage the soil environment, directly damage the roots themselves, or both. So whenever you do work in your forests, it is very important that your management activities protect the root systems. The tree roots have two important functions. They anchor the tree securely to terra firma, and they enable it to access the water and nutrients essential for growth and survival. The main stem, or trunk of the tree, provides the mechanical structure needed to display the array of branches and leaves that capture essential sunlight. The stem also helps transport water, nutrients, and food throughout the tree. Now we'll take a look at the nuts and bolts of the basic biological processes involved with tree growth. All plant growth occurs in specialized tissues called meristems. Meristematic tissues are located in the buds, tips of the roots, and in the cambium layer. As shown in this drawing of a tree root, the actual growth occurs in an area called the zone of elongation. Trees increase in height through the activity of the apical meristems located at the tips of the stem and branches. Diameter growth, also called secondary thickening, occurs in a lateral meristem called the cambium, shown here as the thin layer of green cells between the bark and the wood. Conifer and hardwood trees have fundamentally different shapes, which is a result of their differences in apical dominance. For most conifers, the main stem grows more than the branches, and the branches attached to the trunk grow more than the secondary branches. This results in the familiar conical or A shape of the pines, firs, and other conifers, which we call an excurrent growth habit. Hardwood trees, on the other hand, do not have the strong apical dominance exhibited in conifers, so their growth is more disorderly. We call this the decurrent growth habit. When trees begin to grow in the springtime, growth begins with activation of the apical meristem. The trees break dormancy, the buds burst open, and new foliage appears. All height growth occurs at, not between, apical meristems, so a branch located a foot off the ground will remain at that location no matter how tall the tree grows. What happens is that growth hormones are produced near the apical meristem and begin to spread out to the rest of the tree, activating the cambium layer. The cambium produces two kinds of cells, wood and bark. The cells on the inside of the cambium are called xylem, and they become the sapwood and heartwood of the tree, whose main functions are to act as a conduit carrying water and minerals up from the roots to the crown, and mechanical support. The cells on the outside of the cambium are called the phloem cells, and their job is to transport carbohydrates and growth hormones from the crown to the rest of the tree. Tree growth is interesting because the root, shoot, and diameter growth occur at different times of the year. As shown in this graph, the roots start to grow first around mid-March and peaks in early May. Root growth stops in the hot part of the summer, but then grows again in late fall. The fall root growth phenomenon makes it possible to sometimes plant seedlings in the fall, instead of in the spring. The shoots or tips of the trees begin to grow next, peaking around mid-July before slowing down and stopping by September. Conifer wood is comprised of early wood and late wood, which we'll discuss in the next slide. The early wood begins about the same time as the shoot growth, and the late wood starts around late June. So what do we mean by early wood and late wood? If you have ever counted the rings of a tree, you notice that there are two colors of rings, light and dark. The broader, light-colored rings are composed of early wood or spring wood, and they appear light because the cells have thin walls and are used mostly for transporting water and minerals. The thinner, dark-colored rings are composed of late wood or summer wood, and they appear dark because the cells have much thicker walls. The main function of late wood is to provide mechanical support. Each year's new growth is added on top of the previous year's, thus forming a ring. So if you add one early wood ring plus one late wood ring, that equals 1 year's worth of growth. So we now know that the xylem or wood cells are made up of both spring wood and summer wood. The xylem cells, including both spring and summer varieties, can be further categorized as juvenile wood, mature wood, or reaction wood. Juvenile or core wood is the wood that is formed close to the green crown of the tree. Juvenile wood tends to have a high proportion of spring wood because near the crown the growth hormones are available earlier, persist longer, and are at higher concentration levels than areas that are farther from the crown. Juvenile wood tends to be mechanically weaker and less dense than mature wood. The mature wood is formed farther from the crown and is generally more uniform, stronger, and mechanically stable than the juvenile wood. Reaction wood functions to straighten leaning stems or support branches. Conifer reaction wood is called compression wood and is formed on the side of a stem under mechanical compression. Broadleaf trees form tension wood where the stem is under tension. As we will see, you can employ management strategies allowing you to manipulate the relative amounts of juvenile and mature wood as suits your goals and objectives. Throughout the tree, both in and outside of the crown, the newer wood is called sapwood, and it is made up of both the light-colored early wood and dark-colored late wood. Sapwood is mostly dead, hollow cells that transport water from the roots up to the crown. As the sapwood ages, the remaining living cells eventually die, and this forms the heartwood, which is usually darker than the sapwood. As the cells die, chemical changes occur and the tree accumulates metabolic byproducts in the heartwood, which makes it more resistant to decay. Obviously, the crown of the tree has huge effects on how a tree grows. A large crown supports high levels of wood growth, and the wood formed inside of the crown is mostly the lighter and weaker juvenile wood, while mature wood appears below the crown. Trees that have long crowns tend to have a high degree of taper, meaning the diameter of their trunks decreases rapidly as you move from the base to the top of the tree. But trees with short crowns do not taper rapidly below the crown, giving the tree a much straighter stem. What does all this mean for you as a forest manager? When you plant a new forest on a wide spacing, the low density produces full crowns. The full crowns produce a lot of food and the trees grow fast. But the stems will have a high degree of taper, and the large limbs will result in large knots. Also, the trees will have a higher proportion of the weaker early wood. Or if you plant trees at a high density, the trees will have smaller crowns and slower diameter growth, but their height growth will be faster as the trees strive to compete for sunlight. The trees will have smaller knots, less taper, and a higher proportion of the high-density, stronger late wood. If your stands are too crowded with a high level of competition stress, you can thin the stands to increase both diameter and height growth and maintain the vigor of the stand. Thinning generally encourages more taper, larger knots, and more juvenile wood through producing larger crowns. Another option is to prune off the lower branches and thus directly manipulate the length of the crown. This has a profound influence on wood quality. This will lead to less taper, more late wood, and smaller knots. Caution must be used, however. You should always leave at least 50% of the total height of the tree in live green crown. Otherwise, the trees won't have enough food factory to produce the food needed for growth. More information on silvicultural treatments will be provided in sections 9 and 10. One option is to plant genetically improved trees, which are generally selected based on growth rate, crown, stem, and branch form, and disease resistance. Many of the characteristics lend themselves to the production of high-quality wood, but genetics is only one of several factors affecting tree growth, so cannot by itself ensure high-quality wood. On any given site, some trees will produce better wood than others, so concentrating the site's growth potential in superior trees through thinning might be helpful if genetics is the main controlling factor. But if site conditions are the controlling factor, modifying the site conditions through thinning may either increase or decrease wood quality. For example, a wide spacing can encourage long crowns, large knots, and a high volume of juvenile wood, whereas a closer spacing can encourage short crowns with small knots and a higher volume of mature wood. Fertilization is sometimes used to increase tree growth rate and to some extent tree health, but its primary purpose is to increase the volume of the live crown, which encourages the production and retention of sapwood. The effect on wood quality will be influenced by the extent of the live crown, with a long, deep crown producing poor quality juvenile wood, while the branch-free portion of a stem may grow good quality mature wood at an enhanced rate. If your goal is to grow a large volume of high-quality wood, the best place to put your efforts is the bottom log of the tree. The butt log contains much, if not most, of the merchantable volume, tends to have the greatest proportion of high-quality mature wood, is often relatively free of branches, and is easily pruned. In summary, understanding how trees grow provides you with some powerful insights into how you can manage for a healthy forest that has a good probability of meeting your goals. Always keep in mind that the management decisions you make will affect crown and root development, which will have a direct influence on how fast trees grow, the form of the main trunk, the size of the branches, and the quality of the wood. In our next section on forest ecology and ecosystems, we'll take a look at the interrelationships between trees and other components of forest ecosystems. We'll also take a look at how forest vegetation communities change through time and how those changes are affected by various forms of disturbance such as wildfire. Understanding forest ecology will also provide key insights into how you can successfully manage your forest to meet your goals and objectives. Thank you for watching this section. I hope you will enjoy the rest of the program.